welcome to another riveting edition of Under the Floorboards, where we laugh at the creatures that go bump in the night. I'm your host, John, joined as always by my beautiful co-host, Eric. How are you this week?
Dude, how the fuck do you think I'm feeling this week?
Yeah, feeling real good. Feeling real good. We've been excited for this one for a little while.
The man is among us.
You can't tell by my my video that it's just like
that looks terrible.
I was saying it's just killing itself every second, but at least the recording is working well. But for those of you who have read the beginning of this episode, this is our interview with the one and only writer, director, Anthony Diblasi. Let's give it up.
John and Eric, thanks for having me, guys.
Oh, stuff. The pressure is all ours, man.
I'm loving the background image.
Thank you. Thank you.
And all the greatest hits thing.
Honestly, I'm glad it's more visible than my like entire persona, I guess.
You're like stuck in some Max Headroom void.
This can be the next film. It's just me stuck in a hellhole just looking up.
Yeah.
It seems relatively cheap on an indie budget, right?
That's
Like,
great.
Yeah, exactly.
it's just me looking up for 90 minutes.
Shot on TV.
Terrifying.
Oh God. Well, Anthony, thank you so much for being on the show today. Obviously, we're big fans of yours. And I am like, I was telling Eric earlier, like I'm trying not to like fangirl a little bit, and like it's I guess the faces are just gonna kind of be what they are for this.
I refuse to try not to.
We won't be able to tell with the video what you're doing.
Yeah, dude. It's audio only.
But you've had so many incredible parts of your career that we're really excited to talk about here in a minute. But first, we kind of want to talk a little bit about things that are going on with you right now. You actually just came back from SDCC, and you were working on a comic book called Isla Monstro.
Yeah.
I heard that they're getting like a little bit of an animated feature coming out, and some voices coming back that you worked with in Last Shift, like Juliana. So tell us a little bit about this comic book concept.
Well, it started with my buddy Stephen Shea, who I met when I did Casadega in Florida. He's a filmmaker. He's a great stills photographer. He did our stills, our incredible stills on Last Shift. I mean, any press stuff you see from Last Shift, and I thought he did a great job. He shot all those pictures.
They're sick.
And he recently did a horror comedy called Isla Monstro. And he's great with the marketing. So he did some kind of cross collaborations, released a comic book exclusive to Comic-Con. And I wrote this comic book based on, it was fun too, because he sent me the script. And the movie wasn't near done yet at all. He was still working. He animated this thing by himself.
Oh my God.
But Juliana Harkavy is the lead in it, the lead female in it. Back to all because of Last Shift, of course. But it was great because I read the script and he's like, you can do whatever you want, but you can't have like strong sexual stuff or anything like that. I'm like, okay, but like anything else goes. But you read the comic and it's like, I mean, you read the script and it's like carte blanche to do whatever. And he's got this great segment at the beginning with Vince, like this old VHS with Vincent Price, and it's got all these. It takes place on an island, essentially an island of mutants, where this fuck up gets shipwrecked and he can't get his life together. And he's like, and he's human, and he's like, well, let me open a resort on this island of mutants and like invite the public to come here. Like, and that's what he does. And
it's Kenosha all over again. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Like everybody gets killed, and but it's got all these snow crabs on the island. And so I took all these random references and I just made this crazy story with these snow crabs and this like douchebag. There's one like douchebag character that's always trying to get laid. I'm like, how about he's trying to get laid and he crashed, and he's like hand gliding and he crashes with these two girls and they get like sacrificed by these snow crabs to like this god of Vincent Price. It's just madness. But he got banned from the portal, the exclusive portal on Comic-Con, because it was too violent. So he wasn't allowed to be on the portal for the like like exclusive giveaway via the portal. I mean, it didn't really change anything for us. We were still there doing the signing and stuff, but he's like, "This is your fault. I didn't get on there." I'm like, yeah, what do you do? It's got blood, guts, suggestive nudity. It's got all the good stuff in it.
Absolutely. I see the poster, the picture painting behind you. So,
well, so this is from, I always question, like, should I down? Should I leave it up? That's my half my life is taking this painting up and down for like meetings. But this is from Dread. I don't know if you recognize it.
Oh,
yeah,
that's 100% from Dread. Absolutely. Yeah. No, that's so
and awesome. It is not my wife, though I think many people assume it is.
Some implications there.
She's the Stollery is the actress. Zoe Stollery was the actress in the movie who posed for that. But and Nicole Balzerini painted all those paintings that were Quaid's in the picture. So we had this, and they weren't. This is actually smaller than the one in the movie, but we had this printed and as high res as I could get it. So it's the closest thing to the original. The actress actually got the painting. We gave her the original painting.
It's also hanging above her.
yeah, exactly.
What a meeting flex.
Yeah.
Well, because I felt like when I was watching Dread for the first time, I was like, those paintings are taller than me.
Yeah, they were big. And I think, it's because being around Clive all the time, like Clive in that era, he was painting nonstop. He was working on the Aberrat books, these children's fantasy books, and his entire house and our main office was covered in these massive oil paintings. They were huge, some 20 foot by 20 foot long, like massive. That was like the biggest one. It was so big. It took up the entire size of his living room. And we used to bring people to the house for like every meeting. We're like, come up to the house. But even people who were like, we were like maybe thinking about doing a project where we just invite to the, Guillermo Del Toro or Bryan Singer or anyone and everyone. We're like, yeah, come up to the house.
So it was me, Guillermo Del Toro, Clive Barker.
Sam Raimi was late.
Sam Raimi was late, but it was a great way to just let people walk around. So at the time I was like, well, these paintings got to be big, kind of based on what Clive was doing.
Absolutely. And actually, that's a great segue because I know I'm curious because I just don't know the story and I don't know if Eric does either. So what put you and Clive Barker in the same room together? Like just in general for all of these incredible projects?
I half give credit to A Nightmare on Elm Street. Partial credit to A Nightmare on Elm Street. I went to Emerson College in Boston, film school there, and I mainly went there because they had an LA program. You could go to LA either your junior or senior year to do a semester. So I was like, well, I'm just going to hold off, do it my last semester, and I'm just going to move to LA. And so you just take the dive. We drove down to LA, and you have to get an internship. You kind of your advisor helps you, but you got to reach out. You got to do all the interviews. If you don't get an internship, they send you home. So I ended up getting an internship at Marvel Studios, and this is right after they finished Tobey Maguire's first Spider-Man movie. So Sam Raimi's first Spider-Man movie. So it really wasn't that busy. Kevin Feige was there and Avi Arad was there. They were working together. They were in the same office. And it was great, but it really wasn't much going on. And I was only taking one class, which happened to be a horror film class. And I loved horror. Makeup effects was always why I wanted to get into movies, model making, makeup effects. So when I was down there, I called my advisor. I'm like, listen, I have this free time. I don't want to waste the time in LA. Can I do another internship? Is there anyone you know in horror? And at the same time, the Nightmare on Elm Street box set had just come out. This is the DVD collection, had all the movies, had this incredible special features disc. And Clive was all over that disc. He had a lot of interviews on it. And I was watching. I'm like, wow, I knew Clive's movies. I loved Candyman, loved Hellraiser. I had never read his books at that time. But I just loved how he talked about horror. I just loved how he was so eloquent, and so I was like, do you know anyone? Is Clive Barker, does he have a production company? And she was like, yeah, he does. Here's his info. So I reached out to his producing executive, Joe Daly, who was from Massachusetts, which was, I was from Massachusetts. I was like, okay, this is like an in. So I hounded Joe for a
Like
few
the fucking
weeks.
Boston handshake and
The
walked.
yeah, I came in, gave him the Boston handshake, and he was like, "All right, why don't you come in for an interview?" Because they were ramping up. He was getting really busy, and I went in there, and Clive was at that. But just they invited me to Clive's house in Beverly Hills, and that was definitely the most important meeting in my life, because it was like, this is it, right? You get this, you're going up the stairs to Clive Barker's house, and you're going to talk about this internship, and he was there, and
I'm like,
I
right now.
Yeah, yeah. Get the mop.
Get the mop.
yeah. Well, it was good because Clive and I, we just, I've read a lot of, I was an avid comic book reader then, especially. I don't read comics as much as I would like to anymore, but we just started kind of shooting the shit about comics and stuff, because he was going to comics every Wednesday, just like I was, and
New comic.
and
I know it well.
the Wednesday trek to the comic shop. And Joe was great. I loved Joe. I had such a good, it was probably Joe more than anything that got me. Who knows what Clive said after that meeting, but Joe asked me to come back, and I interned them for a very short amount of time. And then right before I was leaving to go to graduation, I was coming back to LA because I'd already moved there. He was like, do you want to start a position here as an assistant? I was like, yeah, I do.
Yes,
So
sir.
that was it.
Yes, Daddy, please.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was great. I was just thrown into the fire in that office. It was because there were so few of us. It was like they were taking me to meetings that I just had no business being in. We were going, the head of the studios, because Clive was, if Clive wanted a meeting, it's always going to be with the top guy.
Yeah.
Or top gal who runs
Especially
the
at that
studio.
point.
Yeah, especially at that point. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was it. Trial by fire.
I'm gonna kind of piggyback off of the comic thing real quick and just sort of pick your brain. This may be classified as a more rapid fire question, but I'm curious for the comic guys. What's a movie that you would like to do? Maybe a character or a particular arc in books or something like that you feel like you have just, it's in your wheelhouse and you can pull it off and do it justice. I'm curious.
Well, as a kid, I always wanted to make a Batman movie. And
my own heart.
yeah, it's like, I'm always like, I remember like in high school and stuff, always like, fantasizing what would be the best Batman movie I could make. A recent comic that I read that I love was that Berserker comic, the Keanu Reeves one, who, they are turning into a feature, but that I understand why they're kind of making that IP for the movie, because if you haven't read it, it was really entertaining. I didn't finish it yet. I don't know if it's done, but it was really good.
I was gonna say I'm aware of it. I don't think.
Yeah, it's brutal. It's so violent, and it's just incredible.
First couple of issues, it's really fucking good.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got you pegged as kind of, I don't know if you're a Turtles guy or not, but I've got you pegged as like a Last Ronin kind of dude.
Well, yeah, and I read that, and my buddy's making that movie. He's producing it.
It's so awesome.
At 18 Hertz is produced, and when they announced, because they're a horror company, and they announced that was like kind of their first acquisitions, I was like, holy shit, you're doing Last Ronin. Like, that is incredible. And to me, I'm like, this is like the 1990s Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle, like it's them, right? It's that core group
right
in the future. I gotta be honest though, I don't know how that movie's gonna play with like a mainstream.
Yeah.
Honestly,
because
I think it can though, man.
I
like the story is so strong. It's so strong.
Oh, it is. I mean, like fans of comics will love it. I think like, the random 12-year-olds going into that are gonna be like, what the fuck happened to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Why are all my favorite turtles dead?
Nobody likes.
Yeah, it's gonna be like Transformers all over again. like all their favorite Transformers just getting like wasted.
Dude,
Trauma.
He's very like on board with like the with like the Beast Wars movie that they just did recently. He's like, why the fuck is Rat Trap not in this movie?
They killed Ironhide in 3. What the fuck is going on?
What's going on?
It's funny that you say Batman, because like I definitely pegged you as like a person that would have done like an incredible Nightfall movie. Like I would have loved to see you like Azrael. Like I think that would have been insane. Like just
Nightfall.
Some of your cinematography choices and your lighting and color grading, like sure. It's so perfect for that era of storytelling.
I still have all the original Nightfall comics. That was probably my favorite run in comic. I have a Bane statue over there. The Kelly Jones, his artwork, the covers to those comics are just incredible.
Mm-hmm. And the interiors are insane too. Just like
I mean,
the full page arts that he does in that are just like, oh my god.
I mean, I don't know how he busted it out in 1 month. I don't know how he did those so quickly.
1 month. I didn't know that.
Well, I mean, like maybe he had some lead up time, but usually they don't have, more than like 30 days turnaround.
Yeah.
It's like that scene in Swordfish where they put the gun to Hugh Jackman's head and he just has to encrypt that. That's like him painting all.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Bugs Bunny behind the face.
It's probably Sans blowjob, I would venture to guess. Oh my god, that's fucking incredible. So it's obvious that you're like a huge comic book fan. Do you have like, since he's talking about like a character that you'd really like to do, is there like a villain that you would really like to do like in your style of filmmaking? Because I would love to know who's going to be the darkest villain in the DC universe.
Say Spawn.
Oh, I know, right? I don't know, man. A comic I really loved growing up was Pitt. Do you remember Pitt?
I never read that.
I don't know.
He was like the bad Incredible Hulk, and he was like just all fangs and nails, and he had this biker jacket and all these chains. I just loved that character. I was like, man, this would make an awesome movie.
Sure, not an elimination, but
yeah.
He sounds like a radiated Lobo.
Yeah, I mean, kind of, yeah. He looked very. He had like a big ponytail and like kind of like a no face, but teeth. That was Image. That was like Image back in the heyday.
I would say, because like I didn't start reading Image until a lot later. But I love Image comics. Like I love a lot of stuff that like Robert Kirkman does. Like oh god, what's the Outcast? I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun. I never watched the series. I assume it's fine, but it never got more than a season, so who can really tell with anything like that. But yeah, Image definitely puts it up there. Fable was really good. But yeah, there's so much to the and it's so cool that like you're so immersed in this comic book realm as well. And I didn't know Clive Barker was like that as well.
Oh yeah. I mean, he would buy he would just read everything. I mean, he was the first one that told me to read The Boys. He was like, oh, you have to read The Boys.
That's so cool.
He would, and he would just go along the shelves and just literally just like take every issue and go home and read it. I was much more selective, like, okay, Batman, and like Turtles, like The Walking Dead, but I never, and it's funny, I ended up at Marvel, and I told them this in the interview. I said, I don't really read Marvel comics.
Bitch.
I'm very knowledgeable of Marvel comics, but I primarily read DC. But as a collector, and when I was a young collector, it's like, I'm buying comics because of the covers, really, and all these awesome, X-Men covers or Daredevil or Spider-Man. I usually wouldn't sit down and follow them in chronological order. I might just read one, but DC I followed. I always followed the DC characters. but they still gave me the internship. They must.
I assume it's because you like deep storytelling.
Yeah.
Or perhaps one of those know your enemy kind of things.
Yeah, know your enemy. Yeah. At least, I mean, I think they can understand that I at least knew a lot about comic books. So I wasn't like I don't know nothing. Why am I here?
You are just the sleeper agent in
Yeah.
Marvel's production team.
Yeah. But maybe that's why I didn't get hired there. I mean, there really wasn't, I knew there wasn't like a job prospect there because it wasn't, they just didn't have me doing things at that level. I was mainly making like photocopies and they just didn't have the work at that time. I was making photocopy. I remember making like, the Doctor Strange photocopy kit. Like I would make all these character kits, photocopy them, make them into like a collage so that they could send those to actors and be like, here's an introduction to Doctor Strange.
That
Like,
is
I wonder if they still use that shit.
Try not to cry.
Just like I imagine that the owl drops it off on fucking Benedict Cumberbatch's fucking
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Your life now.
Tell us what you think about Doctor Strange.
Very little.
Right, exactly. Most people who is like, that was my favorite superhero.
You're a
Before that,
liar.
yeah, you were a liar.
You were a liar.
But that God, now I just feel like we could talk about comics until the end of
I know.
time.
You go ahead. I've got a question after you. You go ahead.
Okay, if it's is it pertaining to this?
No, it's a pivot,
Oh.
and so that's why I was saying if you want to,
It's a pivot.
it's a pivot.
Because like we do definitely want to talk about a lot of your work too, because obviously like we talked about before getting into this, like we are such huge fans of your writing and your directorial style. And
Thank you.
absolutely, and the choices that you make, I think, really influence a lot of people, a lot of people's writing. And I know I can say that from firsthand experience, because one of the things, and this is more of a generalization as opposed to picking one film in particular, but I feel like you do an incredible job of touching on the depravity of man in a lot of these, especially the horror films that you've done. And I kind of want to know, with, out trying to be your therapist in this, but like I would love to know like kind of where that comes from, like where you're writing stuff. Like I know you did a lot of work with Clive Barker, but I'd love to know what makes Diblasi at the end of the day.
I think, and my wife can attest to this, that I'm always been really fascinated with people who are considered a little left of center, right? Like the people that are a little hard to define, a little dangerous feeling, socially awkward. Because I'm always fascinated by, inherently, I think most of those people are good, and the people around them not accept. Because when I grew up, I remember, I had like my core group of friends, who were people I'd see all the time, and we'd like make movies and stuff like that. But then I'd have friends that were more, the people who didn't have a lot of friends. I think I always felt bad for them in a way, and didn't mind being around them and like giving them a support group.
There's that cafeteria, right? Where
yeah,
it's kind of conglomerate and
yeah. And so that was the stuff I always gravitated towards writing, because it's like, you never know when you meet someone, you really never know who they are. And you never know what's going to set them off or what their secrets are. And it's like with Dread, and that was the first film I directed. I really, number one, I was not that far out of college, so I really gravitated towards that group. And I was like, well, how do I take this 30-page story and expand it into something that feels faithful to Clive's short story? And for me, it was that way. And since I was in film school, it was like, well, let's set it in film school. And that chance encounter where, Quaid and Steven meet. And I'm like, how often are we, especially when you're in college or at a younger age, how often do you meet people like come randomly and you're like, oh, yeah, let's talk, let's hang out. They just have a cigarette in the alley, and it just, imagine where that leads. And like, and Missionary kind of draws on the same themes. I also even like to put actors in the movies that there's always one actor in each of my movies that is that guy or girl. That one that is like, this person is a little weird. I can, a little, I can tell they have social awkwardness. I'm going to put him in the movie because number one, it makes the movie set a little more exciting. and I don't know, it's just this something I'm really drawn to. It is the depravity of man. It is these things that people can do to each other, and it's, everything's normal until it's not in your life. You're just going around about your business, and then suddenly you're getting hit with an axe, and it's a
shit happens.
It's shit happens. It's a thread difference. It's a tightrope
My
walk.
mom's dead.
Yeah, it's like you just never know.
So in the case of Dredd, was that Sean as opposed to Jackson? Not that you have to answer that question, but I'm just putting the pieces together.
Yeah. I mean, Sean was the perfect epitome of Quaid. I didn't remember how we met, but met in LA, and he's from the UK. And I was like, this guy's perfect to play Quaid. Sean Evans, just like, I thought he was so perfect for that part.
He was so unsettling. That entire film, he was so unsettling.
Yeah.
So like with Dredd specifically, you said that was your first directorial, or I guess your directorial debut.
Yeah.
Which honestly could have fooled me, but because it was so like this. And Eric and I were actually talking about this after I showed him Dredd for the first time, and I was like, everything that you do feels so intentional in a lot of these films, and between like pre and post production, right? Was there, so with that mentality that you kind of have, where does the creativity from everyone else kind of start to come in? Because like there's definitely your Scorseses in the world that are like XYZ, this is exactly what's going to happen. Where do you think your leniency to the creativity kind of comes in? Because it feels like everybody just kind of fell into place for Dredd for your envisionment of this.
What, the films that I write or had written with Scott, I think those are my best movies because they're like directly coming out of my head, and that's so much of the pre-production process right there. So when I'm on set, I'm so prepared with the script. I think a lot of it comes with like my relationship with the actors and rehearsal with the actors, getting them very comfortable, working with me, and then also allowing them to do what's on the page, but then a lot of improv on set. And also forcing improv out of them at times, kind of keeping them on their toes by giving someone a weird direction and playing off of it. I like to do things like that because it keeps reactions fresh. As far as all the other departments, I'm really big about, I like to direct because I feel like I'm quick with making decisions, and I like to work with actors. I think when you're directing, like basically all you're doing once you get on set is answering, and in pre-productions, you're just answering a million questions. And you have to know the answer, and you have to stick with the answer that you give. And once you do that, I'd like to let all the departments just do their best work. I'm like, okay, you know what you're here to do. I'm not going to micromanage the departments, but I think they have all the info. I do a lot of lookbooks and things like that ahead of time to give a palette of what I want this movie to feel like, what I want it to convey, and having close conversations with the DP is probably the most important thing too, about the look of the film and the pace of the film. And then I am so hands-on with post-production. I'm obsessed with sound and obsessed with music cue and sound and how it merges. I think Scorsese is like that too. It's like he orchestrates music and sound in such a great way in his films, and Tarantino to an extent. but I need to,
Very much so. Yeah.
yeah. I need to be in, like, when I'm editing, I'll drop in a lot of the sound design. And I'll start to do, I like to use production sound. I hate replacing production sound because I play drums. So when I'm editing, I create sound rhythms in my head. And that's how I edit to these. And it could be it could be clothes rustling, it could be someone's footsteps down the hall, it could be a creaking of a door. It's just all this production music. It creates this rhythm in my head, and that's how I edit. So if anyone changes that along the way, I'm like, wait, you took out this like millisecond sound, like you got to put that back in. And I'm just very kind of anal about the post process.
For sure.
But
I hear that a lot, like especially in Last Shift and Malum, where this is how you establish fear through sound design.
yeah, it's a huge, especially for those two movies, because those two movies, the unique thing we did was we recorded all our sound design in pre-production. I don't want to say all, but we recorded. We're like, let's do something and treat it like a summer camp scenario where we have our location. Let's bring the sound team in and give them a couple days just to run hog wild all over this station and just come up with creepy sounds. Just every sound this police station makes, and then they create sounds, banging stuff together, the doors, the AC systems, the pipes, everything. And then we'd have actors come in and do actor sessions in the different locations, screaming, crying, just strange sounds. It got crazy. We do crazy. But then all that stuff I had to lay into the movie while I was editing it. It was all natural to the environments in both the movies.
That's a really interesting approach.
It's fun too, because it's almost like doing a radio play a lot of the time.
Sure. Yeah.
Well, I've heard a lot about that too, with people having like sound captures for like when they want to do like ADR and stuff like that, right? And want to have something to lay that over. So like what you're doing is taking like this giant step to make it so if you have to do ADR, God forbid, you have what the place sounds like available.
Yeah. And I mean, I hate ADR, but sometimes it's necessary. And sometimes you can try to get wild lines, safety lines on the set. We'll do that too.
What do you mean by that? What is a wild line and a safety line?
So like, if there's a sound discrepancy and you think you didn't get dialogue, what you do is you just the sound team will do wild lines and they'll take the actor aside and they'll do the dialogue in the same location, just without any of the crew there. So it was just dialogue with no picture. And I did that quite a few times on Malum too. You just get the dialogue, no picture, and then I can drop it in post, and it will sound identical instead of having to be some like recorded in a booth somewhere.
So does that still come out? I mean, obviously it came out well in Malum having to do that, but like, is that an easy thing to do when the actor doesn't have reference to like watching their mouth, or are you just turning the camera around and kind of like letting them watch to do this like on set re-record if you don't think that you captured it?
It will usually just be them talking into a mic, so they won't be. And a lot of time we'll recall, and I can give it back to them. I'm like, you said it like this in this speed, or they'll recall. Like most actors are really good at mimicking something they did. It doesn't need to be perfect, because you can do a lot with post sound where you can slide things and maneuver things. The sound team can really do a lot with a wild piece of dialogue to get it to fit. And then also you can just have it be off camera if you need to be. It doesn't need to be on camera.
I was going to say, it kind of reminds me, you're a drummer, so you know this, but it reminds me of what you would do with like an isolated track or something in a song or a recording.
Yeah, exactly.
Plug and play that, right?
Yeah.
So one of the things I was curious about, again, kind of pertaining to the timeline of knowing that your wife is in some of these movies, when did you guys meet?
We met right before Last Shift. We met at Marcus Dunstan's premiere of the collection It was The Collection. I think it was the second movie at Screenfest. We met at a party, and we didn't run in the
I
same
like that
circle.
she was your universal constant between Last Shift and Malum.
Yeah, yeah,
The anchor
yeah.
being.
The anchor
The anchor being, yeah, exactly, yeah. So it was right before Last Shift, and then I wrote that part for her in Last Shift. And then I was like, well, we're going to carry this over to Malum too.
That's awesome.
Which is an incredible scene. I love watching her just like look off into the distance and then just like start having like this existential fucking crisis.
She's great at that. She's great at that.
I want to talk about Malum for a second. If you're
Yeah.
sick of answering this question, please just like give me a middle finger or something.
That's totally appropriate on the show.
Totally appropriate on the show. I personally understand the desire to reimagine something that you created. Just as a creative body is who I am as a human being, I totally understand that. But where do you think the value in that lies in the future of horror movies? Let's say 11 years past, 9 years past between the first time you do a story and you get to kind of reimagine it with a bigger budget.
We get the Dread remake.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get the Dread remake. I'm just curious what that, from a creative standpoint, why as a creator go back and say, hey, let's try this way this time.
I imagine it's not the kind of thing that's going to have a lot. You know, so who knows about the future of these things? I mean, for us, it was a really unique situation. I think what happened with Last Shift is that we made that movie for so little money. I mean, a minutia of a fraction of what Dread cost. And it was mainly out of a frustration to like control our movie, you know, to control ownership of our movie. So we're like, let's just make it for a little bit of money. And I was 100% satisfied with Last Shift. You know, it was far better of a film. Cylinders were just firing. And it was a far better of a film than I had expected it to be. Let's say, you know, it's like, it just, by that point, we were so tuned in with the crew we had, with the sound team we had, with the page count, because by that point, I knew to put every dollar on the screen, we're going to shoot. The script was only 69 pages long. And we had other producers look at it and they were like, where's the third act? We're like, no, believe me, this is going to be exactly 90 minutes long. And it was like down to the T. I didn't cut anything out of that movie. So, I mean, I really didn't, we talked about doing a sequel. Like we had some ideas for a sequel and then Scott really wanted to do a prequel. I don't love prequels, but we just never wrote anything. And then, you know, like all these, you know, eight years later, I guess, I was introduced to Luc LeBeau, who was starting Welcome Villain. And when Magnolia released Last Shift, we always felt like that could have been a theatrical film. It played really well with an audience. The sound was designed for a theater. You know, but Magnolia, I'm not going to say they gave it a solid release for what they thought it was. You know, they definitely put some marketing behind it, and it, you know, got on Netflix soon after. And when it hit Netflix is when I think really people started to consume it. But I always felt like they could have done more with it. So that's kind of like what Luke said when I met him. He's like, that's a great movie and they could have done more with it. Like, what do you think about revisiting this world? And I'm like, okay, in what way? And over time, we decided, because we still felt Last Shift, it's still one of those movies that a lot of people would be like, hey, have you ever seen Last Shift? And your friends will be like, no, I've never seen that movie. So we felt we could reimagine it and open it up to a new section of an audience. You know, the Last Shift crowd will find it, but then it is going to open up to a new audience, which is mainly why I didn't want to call it Last Shift again.
Yeah. It's a different.
It's a different
again.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the reimagining process, I wanted to make sure it was a different movie and gave audience members a different experience. You know, so I can understand if some people are like, I like Last Shift better, I think it's scarier, or oh, I like Malin better, it's grotesque and has crazy monsters. They're just different movies.
I'm biased, but I'm so I just always
Yeah.
appreciated the depth of the lore and the backstory. You know, you have your characters taking a physical presence and not a spiritual presence in this sense, and that made it feel a lot more real for me. So I was just saying that.
I mean,
yeah,
that was the most excited thing I was about with Malin, is that to really create a mythology all our own for Malum and his flock, and terminology that people had not heard before. And to be fair, like we did Last Shift and we used Payman, this demon Payman. Well, then Hereditary came out and they used Payman, and Hereditary was like this big hit. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that again, because I'm not the people will compare it to Hereditary.
new levels, new devils, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I just wanted to go in a completely different direction, and I really love that lore in Malum, and I hope we can do more with it in future movies. I think the Flock of the Low God is cool, and it's a cool cult. And
We pray to the low god in this house.
Yeah,
yeah.
You should see the living room chair.
Did you keep the chair? Like,
yeah,
now
I
I'm
wanna know what the
curious.
chair is. Yeah.
We disassembled it when we.
Oh, that's like the Iron Throne, man.
I know it was I mean, I honestly had I had very little input on that throne. It was in the script. It said a detritus throne,
Which is,
which is like exactly what and again, well, and Nicole, who did these paintings, she was the production designer. And her and her husband, they created that throne, and I was like, this is perfect. I love it. It's exactly what I want. It's just some backwoods detritus throne.
So one of the things I really want to put in, like while we're talking about Malum, because like I saw Last Shift when it came out in 2014, because I was a big fan of going to. We had a movie stop by me, and like just like you were talking about with the advertising, like that whole shot, like you can see on screen right now behind me, like that was just like how, like as a horror fan, how would you not want to fucking grab that film and figure out what's going on?
Yeah.
And I loved Last Shift. I fell in love with it. I think a lot of indie horror films are kind of hard to, hit sometimes. That's part of why we do what we do. It's hard for some of the word to get out about these kind of things, because I didn't know about Dread. I didn't find out about Extremity until Malum came out, and I was like, oh, here's all of these other films and all of these new streaming services that are available, to which, guys, most of these are available on Amazon, which is the best way to actually support a lot of these independent filmmakers if you're interested. Some of them are on Tubi, but
Tubi's killing it right now. Like, I'd have to say, like, I'm getting a huge resurgence with Dread and Last Shift again with Tubi, right?
We will always sing their praises
as long as they're paying you.
Yeah.
Well, that's funny because, well, not to get into financial stuff, but a movie like Dread, like something that I get residuals from, you get your residuals on a quarterly basis, and I open the thing and I'm like, why is this so big? Like, why now?
Yes.
Like all these years later. And then I found out, oh, it's on Tubi, and Tubi's like cable. They pay like cable.
Yeah.
It's like commercials, like the good old days, and people know how to make money that way. But it's good to see, like, and not that I keep track of TikTok, but because I don't, but you can see these secondary videos on Instagram. It's like oh, people are seeing Dread and they're seeing Last Shift again, and I don't know if Extremity's up there now, but they're seeing
Extremity's on Tubi, in case you guys are wondering.
Everything's on Tubi.
Everything that matters, anyway.
And it's incredible, and I'm glad to know that is your response to that, because I have been all over, like, since I have seen Dread, I've kind of been all over the place when people are asking me for recommendations, because I already know that that's probably a movie that you haven't seen, and it's like, okay, directed by Anthony Diblasi, based on a short story by Clive Barker, and Jackson Rathbone's in it. That's enough for the Vox Populi to be like, okay,
especially in
check it out.
2009, like
Yeah.
Twilight era Jackson Rathbone.
Yeah. 2009 Jackson Rathbone.
Yeah, that's where that budget was.
Yeah. But and Laura Donnelly, who's kind of blowing up now, who is, yeah, it's great to see, like, she's getting a ton of work now doing Werewolf by Night, and she's on the stage again. But it's cool to be like, okay, well, she was in Dread. She's awesome in Dread.
But one of the things that I wanted to point off at Malum before I got on this diatribe about Dread, because again, like I could just talk about, I could just talk about all of these movies forever. But one of the things that while we're on the topic of Malum, that I was so impressed with Last Shift, because again, I loved Last Shift. Malum took that lore, and the craziest part to me is it put it in the same amount of time. This is still a 90-minute so it was mind-boggling to me that I was just like, oh, so this was like what he really got to do with like more of a budget and more of what he wanted to do, and really get to expand, but you kept it condensed in a way that's still palatable for a lot of people. And I think that's where like Alum has so much charm between that and some of the slaughter scenes and the way some of the hangings are recreated. Like there's just the parallels are what really make it fun for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, oh, that was in Last Shift, or it's like, oh, that was so new. But specifically about Malum, and you can probably answer this question, because me personally, I hate wide shots a lot. I think they stagnate pretty often. So I want to know, in the very last shot of Malum, where you have Jessica and Cheney sitting next to each other in those thrones, like, what do you think made that space feel so full, like it wasn't stagnating and you could like really end the story like that?
I can't. There was, in the script, it had a different ending. That shot was in there, but it wasn't the last thing that ended the film. And when I was editing the movie, I was like, I just really like, it was such an awkward shot. And it was so awkward and wide, and but he's so far away, so you can't see how like ridiculous it is in some ways of him just sitting there waiting. And for me, it's the fire, like it's the crackle of the fire and it's the crickets. And you're just sitting on this moment. I was like, I just want to hold this. So, because also your eye, because I'm thinking as an editor, I'm like, okay, first and foremost, people are going to look at him. And they're going to really take in the first time. They're like, oh, okay, we're the firelight's on him. Like he's sitting in that throne. Let's just take that in. Your eye's going to move to the right. You're going to see Jess there. And Jess's throne was beautiful. And you don't really get to see much of it. If you look at the feminine form of her throne and the masculine form of his, they fit kind of in this yin and yang. And what they did is they took this, the rocking chair is the rocking chair from the flashback where her mother is holding the baby. They broke it down with all these elements from the movie. There's pieces of a locker there. There's tile from the police station. The clock is there, which is the same clock from Last Shift, by the way. We use the same clock from
There's the parallel.
Same exact clock from Last Shift. So all these little things on her throne holding it together. And I just wanted to build this anticipation of them like taking her dead in the chair and just her bouncing up at that last moment. I don't know. I love to do shit like that with editing. I do some stuff like that in Dread. I always like to end things like either a little later or a little earlier than they should end, and it creates an interesting rhythm. Some people probably hate that ending because it's like, what the hell's going on here? But I feel like that boom.
Something that's in sync.
Yeah.
Because I honestly, I felt a lot of that in Extremity as well. Like that timing, that cadence. As like throughout like her journey, I just kind of felt like, especially there's a scene, for those of you who haven't seen it, you should definitely check it out. but the scene where they're in the middle of the snow field or whatever,
Mm.
and they're like being told that they have to like make to a certain part, and they've got like the fake guns and shit. Like
Yeah.
when that gun goes off and blows that motherfucker away, that was like the most perfectly timed thing I had ever seen in a film. So,
What's the BPM on that gunshot?
Yeah. That's just, I mean, and the Extremity is almost a lesson in editing, like, because for me, so much of that was about the narrative structure and kind of like letting my DP, um, Scott, just when we went into that, we were like, let's just make a really visually stunning movie that I can play with narratively. And the edit was so important with that movie, and I had such a blast like editing how that story was being told, and not, is it a horror movie? I don't know. Does it have horrific things in it? Well,
I'm
I don't.
afraid of being stabbed in the dick, Anthony.
Yeah, yeah, good. You know,
Most,
if that gets you, then yeah, everyone should fear that. Every man.
agreed. Yeah.
But a question about Extremity that I had, because I know some stuff is like kind of open to interpretation about different things, but there's a particular scene where the two characters are being chased by dogs, and the girl kind of gets around the corner, and there's like, for me, the scene felt like, is this really here? Is this really happening? Or is this not happening? And I know that the character that we are following kind of has her own mental anguish that she's been dealing with. And that's why we're in this whole position to begin with. Uh,
Yeah.
do you have a definitive of whether what she was seeing was real or not when she was hiding?
Yeah, I think that's a vision of her sister, and it's a little, you see the sister in flashback, and the sister's dead now. And I think every time you see this ghostly, and her appearance changes too, a bit like over the course of the movie.
Mhm.
I think she's just a representation of this, of two things. And in the script and in like the original lookbook, um
I thought the lookbook was behind you.
yeah, exactly. um it was this devil character in a way that was a representation of her sister, but the closer it got to her, it was guiding her towards this darkness that needed to come out of her in a way and to need to be let loose. So she sees it, but I don't think it's really there. I don't think it's really haunting the maze or anything like that. I think it's all in her mind.
Very
That's
cool.
how I intended it.
Okay, that's what I
Yeah,
really need
yeah.
to know, because I was like that, like, because watching it, I was like, this is, and I'm sure that was intentional as well, like having that left up to interpretation. But that's really cool,
Yeah.
like the definitive answer for something like that.
It's like did the top at the end of what's it called?
Fall down. I know.
Yeah,
Inception.
yeah, Inception. Thank you. Yeah, I was gonna
Yeah.
say Interstellar. That's not it.
We just watched that again the other day, and I was like debating with Natalie. I'm like, well, it doesn't, because she was like, no, it's all. I'm like, no, like, look at the kids, they're like in the same clothes, and the top, it's like, wouldn't it's like, it's really, it's a lot to go with there.
I'm a person that believes in the wobble.
Yeah, I saw
The
the
wobble.
The
Yeah,
wobble was
uh-huh.
enough for me.
Right.
Every other time is spun perfectly.
Because we know science is sound in this universe. So
Yeah.
physics must apply.
But for edit, like, that's a perfect example. Like at the end of Mount, like the end of that movie, the editing is great, right? It's just you just get this slightly, just a tiny little wobble before you cut out.
Little left from center, like you've been saying. This
Yeah.
whole time.
Yeah.
It's a little awkward.
What's our time at real quick? I've got another one. If
We got 10 minutes,
all right,
baby.
sick. I this is rude. I want to
Sure.
circle back real quick to Dread, because I'm curious, as somebody who adores this movie and adored this scene and found it to be one of the most brutal examples of humiliation and self-hatred ever in horror. I want to know what the writer's room looked like when you decided to have Cheryl bleach and steel wool her skin in that movie.
Yeah, I mean, that was all
sanity, bro.
the sand, and that's not in the short story. And Clive in the short story has a great representation of dread in all these forms. And I really wanted a visual interpretation of dread. And Nicole, who did the paintings on that movie, she has a port wine birthmark on her leg. And it runs down all her leg. And she was always very self-conscious about it. And so I was like, it would be cool to have this character who had this birthmark on their body that was just their representation of dread. It was that every time they went out, they had to deal with knowing that people are looking at them. And I walk down the street and see people with this on their face. I mean, now it pops out to me everywhere because I made a movie with it.
I've got one on my back. I mean, like, yeah.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
And to see someone with it who has it on their face, like half their face, and it's like,
can't put a shirt over that.
Yeah, you can't cover it. And I'm always the type of person that's like walking up to someone, and if I see something like that, I'm gonna be right away like, that's badass. Like that makes you a badass.
Hell yeah.
It's kind of Quaid's point of view, and that conversation they have in the movie. He's like, that is, badass. And you got to stop fucking around with your life and like just take control.
Great pickup line.
Yeah. And then he gives her all this confidence, and then he just fucking tears her down. And just to see what will happen. And I was like, well, she's got nothing left to do but scrape it off.
Yeah.
There's a great deleted scene. I'm going to release it on my Instagram page because I've kind of been releasing a lot of.
Here we go.
Yeah. I've been releasing a lot of BTS stuff of Dread on my Instagram page, but there's this great deleted scene. I really didn't want to cut it out. And if you go back and watch the movie, you'll see her costumes different and things. She gets humiliated, and she kind of hears his words. And instead of just like folding up and going to the bathtub, she goes out like on a rager, and she just gets wasted, and she's on the dance floor, and she's in the skimpy dress, and like you can see the birthmark, and like all these guys are just like, she's just wasted out of her mind, and all these guys are touching her and passing her around. And it's like this climactic scene with the music that crescendos. And then it just cuts to the bathtub, and that's where she like hates herself. And then she just goes. That's when she goes for it.
Oh my God.
Please release that.
Yeah, please.
I will. I'll do it soon.
That's so fucking sick. Sorry. Because that scene just, I mean, like with Dread being what it was, man, I like that scene stood out to me as like the pinnacle, and it's placed perfectly from a storytelling standpoint of this is what absolute terror is. It's often our own insecurities or it's internalized, right?
Yeah.
And that was what made that so powerful to me, because I feel like people explore themes of self-hatred and self-loathing, but they don't really pull the trigger on it. No pun intended.
Yeah. Yeah, it's all stems from within us, really. I mean, all these fears we carry, and a lot of it is this self-conscious. It's not real, right?
Yeah,
it's like we spend all this time worrying about shit that doesn't matter, and like building up this fear. What was cool about when she comes out of the bathtub and she's walking down the hallway. And at that point, Jackson's coming in. I didn't let Jackson see her at all before. So on action, he just comes running around that corner, and that's the first time he gets to look at her, just fucking mangled. And they got really, they were really close by that point because that was towards the end of the shoot. They had become good friends. So like seeing her like half naked and just like shredded, like I think really he had such a good performance in that take.
And Jackson, from everything that I've seen him interviewed in, is the fucking man, right? He's so fucking cool with everyone all the time. It's just
he's so wild too. Like
yeah.
he's like quirky. You know, that guy, he'd be Steve Buscemi if he could. You know, that's the kind of actor he wants to be.
Dude, exactly.
He really wanted to play Quaid. Like he so wanted to play Quaid. He really was like, well, I already cast that part, and you know, you'd really be good in the Steven role. But he really wanted to play Quaid.
And Sean was so perfect.
Yeah.
Like he was so fucking perfect. I think it would be interesting to see Jackson in it, but I remember when I watched Dread for the first time, I texted Eric and I was like, dude, I think I like Jackson Rathbone.
Our understanding of Jackson Rathbone at that time was Twilight.
Yeah, for you, of course.
Was like
and I never thought it was anything against him. I was just like, I'd never seen him in anything that he really got to like spread his wings. And I felt like everybody that was in Dread. And it's funny that like Malum is like your big film that's out right now. And like, we keep coming back to Dread. All of your films are great, but there's like a special place in my heart for Dread because again, like everyone that I tell this movie to, they almost immediately watch it and like, they're just blown away by it. You know, and it's something that's so unique. And again, the performances were incredible. The cinematography was incredible. The in sync, like again, you could have fooled me that this was your directorial debut, man.
You know, it's a movie that like you're the right person at the right time to tell a certain story. And we had been working with Dread a long time in the studio system already. That movie was at Fox for quite a few years, and they wanted it to be this like PG-13 college movie. And I was an executive on it. So I saw like everything that we did, you know, things that we didn't want to do wrong, but things that we kind of had to do wrong because of the studio. Lots of different writers and directors attached to it. So by the time I was like, we had done Midnight Meat Train and Book of Blood, I was like, I really want to direct this next movie. And I had been prepping Pig Blood Blues to do.
I saw that actually.
That was like the one that we were supposed to do. And there was like a lot of Clive's projects had a quagmire of rights because of he piecemealed out a lot of the Books of Blood stuff. So it wasn't quite clean enough. And we were getting back Dread. I was like, I love Dread. Dread and Pig Blood were my two favorite stories. And also Dread was nothing supernatural in it. And it was so close to my age and coming out of college. I felt like I knew what it needed to be and what Clive hoped it would be, and keep everything that was in his short story in the movie intact. Because every time we were at the studio, they wanted to cut out the meat scene. I was like, but that's like the crux of the damn story. Like, you can't cut this meat scene out. Like, believe me, it's gonna work. It may not feel terrifying like some horror movie finale, but it's gonna work.
Yeah.
You as a viewer still like staring slack-jawed, gagging this, which is all that it needed to be, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's all that it needed to be.
completely effective.
So we are getting to the end of time here, but we have two quick questions for you.
Yeah.
The first one is one that I think that I already know the answer to, but I
Rapid fire mode engaged.
Butter boobs.
Wait, what? What?
Butt or boobs?
Oh, I think you said thunder, but well, boobs.
Yeah.
I mean, that why are you even asking this?
I've seen your movies. I just wanted it confirmed.
Thunder boobs confirmed.
Thunder boobs confirmed.
Yeah, thunder boobs specifically. Yes.
And then Eric has his question that he likes to ask.
Always, this is my factory standard, homie. What goes on your pizza, bro?
Oh, you know, man, coming from Boston,
you just gave him dread.
Yeah.
You know, I'm like a mushroom guy. I love mushrooms. I never eat pepperoni anymore. I used to love pepperoni growing up, but I just don't eat pepperoni anymore. But I'm always gonna put mushroom, mozzarella, some, Parmesan, red sauce, or when I go home to Boston, me and my brother just kind of pizza hop. I'm like, what are the new pizza places? Let's like just eat pizza for like days, just because you just have to. There's LA just does not have good pizza. The few good pizza places. There's one near where we lived in Larchmont, excellent, but pizza sucks in LA. That's probably too long of an answer, but that's my answer.
That's fine.
Yeah, just don't eat the barbecue out there.
Don't eat the barbecue in
LA. Oh man, well, Anthony, what do you have coming up? Is there anything that you'd like to push right now while you have the opportunity?
Well, listen, it's still time to push all these movies. You know, you need to go see Dread on Tubi because Dread, you know, it still finds new audiences every day. Dread was one of those movies that when it got picked up with 8 Films to Die For, and I will say that was not our choice. That movie got kind of shadowed with just the release of what 8 Films to Die For was. It's very confusing. You could see it on your poster, 8 Films to Die For. So like you said, like it wasn't until last shift you're like, oh, Dread, and this, like, it's still, I would love to see people watch Dread because it is one of my, I think, more accomplished movies, and a movie where I had more time and more budget and control to really do what I needed to do. Malum, we had more money, but we were very tight on time. You know, it's always a compromise. But go see Malum, go see Last Shift, go see Extremity, for crying out loud.
Extremity is so much fun. I can say this firsthand. Like, guys, if you like a movie with great practical effects and a great premise, and honestly, one of the things that I love about these Diblasi films that I keep telling people is I love the endings. The endings they don't feel drawn out, and the turnarounds are typically fucking insane. And Extremity is included in that.
I'm gonna go watch Extremity tonight because I haven't seen it.
Cool.
And I'll admit that live.
Because when a certain character shows up at the end of Extremity, I was like, what the fuck is going on?
and again, I'll say, I don't know if Extremity, is it a horror movie? Probably, right? But it's psychological. It's meant to mess with your head. But you know, besides that, my wife and I are writing together a lot now, got some horror projects on the forefront. So keep an eye out for the next announcements. They will be coming along.
Hell yeah, literally always. Well, guys, and actually, Anthony, do you have anything to say to your fans?
I mean, listen, come listen to me on these great podcasts. John and Eric killed it. I love when I can come on a podcast or an interview and just have a blast and talk about cool movies and shoot the shit about comics, you know? So, but listen, I appreciate my fans. I appreciate new fans that are coming because of Malum and seeing my old work, and appreciate Tubi, man, because Tubi brings it to a new audience. So check it out.
Oh God. Well, guys, sorry for my video stream this entire time. Thank you, Anthony, for being on the show. Give it up for Anthony Diblasi one more time, everybody.
Thanks, guys.
And thank you guys so much for joining us. Thank you again, Anthony. And thank you for joining us where it creaks, it cracks, and we laugh at the creatures that go bump in the night. Good night, everybody.